You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. This is Force 13 Live. We're branding it a live tropical weather bulletin this morning because it's the usual tropical weather bulletin time. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to make the actual format, but we have our usual live event format in place, and we can talk about everything that's going on around the world of tropics tonight with you live here on Force 13 Live, and we'll be talking about many other things, and you can talk about them with us on the air tonight. The main story tonight is that Typhoon Francisco made landfall in Kyushu earlier on, as what we're calling a Category 2 storm has weakened significantly since then, it would appear. We're still giving it 75 miles an hour on the way down. Interesting intensification phase that happened just before that landfall, in which briefly the satellite appearance gave high-end Category 3, perhaps even low-end Category 4 readings, but obviously it happened so quickly that it wouldn't have intensified that much. And still speculation across the community about just how strong was Francisco before it made its landfall. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Lekima is also intensifying, and that one is headed eventually towards Taiwan. You'll see it on the screen sooner or later as this swings by. That one could be a significant threat to the islands, to the island of Taiwan, a stage 7 on the CDPS, believe it or not, as well. Elsewhere, 11W has formed as well near the Mariana Islands, and Flossie is still going as a tropical depression with some significant flare-ups, believe it or not, as it nears Hawaii. Here to talk about all of these things with me tonight is our esteemed team, consisting of Tim, David, Max, and Justin. Good evening to you all.
Good evening.
How is everyone tonight? It's been a while since we've been live.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Doing good.
Flash flood warning at HQ a couple hours ago.
Flood warning over in Florida.
Yep.
So there we are. It's going on everywhere. Alright, whilst we're looking at these images here, we're looking at many different things. Computer models of 11W, the intensity there. You can see the UK Met going off the deep end at 90 knots. HWRF only going with a Category 1 now. That's interesting. I thought it was saying more earlier. Elsewhere, the Atlantic, Eastern Pacific, Central Pacific, not too much going on. Of course, Flossie is there nearing Hawaii with that flare-up. And of course, we look at the Western Pacific and we've got all of this going on. If you'd like to send us a message whilst we're on the air tonight, we're staying for a while. Start your message with Force 13 all in text and it will light up in the chat for me live. And we're happy to take questions at all times. Who should we talk to first? Who'd like to chat with us right now? Hi Justin, how are you? What's your impression of what's going on with, well, first of all, Francisco and that landfall in Japan earlier on?
Yeah, well, I think it was like a Category 2 landfall. It was quite small given the overall strength of the storm, but well, I guess it really had much else about it.
It did what, sorry?
Well, I said I'm really not going to anything else to say about it.
Yeah. Well, it's been a pretty compact system. It's still going to continue on towards the Korean Peninsula. I'm trying so hard to get it on the screen here. For some reason, it's not working at all right now.
JTWC have been quite slow to keep up with its intensity.
I'm still...
and
I don't know where everything has just gone here. I'm trying to get the
think we've
storm on
lost
the
it.
screen right now as we go along here, so just bear with us for just a moment. Usual
think we've lost
difficulties
it.
here at Force 13 HQ. I think we do have it now. There is imagery. Typhoon Francisco that made landfall earlier on. Those are the latest images. As it proceeds through, it's already over the central part of Kyushu, heading towards the northern part of the island now. It will make that crossing before too much time passes, really, and it will be out heading towards South Korea. It is moving fairly quickly, and it's then going to strike Korea and then veer off towards the northeast. Whilst we're on this imagery, let's see if we can look further south and see the massive influence, increasingly, of Lekima, which, by the way, has been named by Pegasa. I think it was Hannah. Can anyone confirm that?
I think it was.
Yeah. So the Philippines have named that storm. There's no warnings in effect, but you can see on the side there convection in relation to...
So it is named Hannah.
in relation to Lekima, extending way over to the west towards Luzon. And then out over there you can see some more areas of interesting activity, and that is another invest that's just formed now, 96W. So there is a lot of things going on right now. In the meantime, an excuse to test out the new split screen on this stream. There's Tim. How are you, Tim, tonight?
I am doing great, Nathan. And just to touch back on Francisco a little bit, when we were running the model runs last night, David and I were, it was really interesting that we were seeing the shear drop to less than 5 knots, and sea surface temperatures were running right about 29 degrees Celsius. So it really did not surprise me seeing it going from its 50, 55 knot intensity up to Category 2 over the course of about 8 to 10 hours.
Yeah, were you surprised to see that? Sea surface temperatures were pretty warm, so there was always the possibility that kind of thing could have happened at 29 degrees Celsius waters.
Oh, yeah, it was something that was in the back of my mind when I was looking at the analytics for what could have been an update, and it did surprise me, and yes, we just got cat bombed.
Oh my word. You saw it here first, folks.
Yes, that's one of my kittens. Actually, the kitten I just got about a month and a half ago has a tendency of climbing up on my chair. Those that watch the U.S. channel know this is nothing new. But yeah, 29 degrees Celsius, sea surface temperatures, shear was dropped in less than 5 knots. It had everything it needed to really rapidly intensify. It just ran out of time, and that's probably the saving grace.
Oh, absolutely. If it had the time to... If it had more water, 12 hours worth of more intensification time, with low wind shear values that were prevailing over Francisco at the time, and those warm sea surface temperatures, we could have easily seen a Category 4 right there.
That's honestly what I was fearing when I was looking through all the conditions. Another 12, 13 hours, as you said, Nathan, and places like Miyazaki, Fukumoto, up towards Nagasaki, we would have been looking at a cat. Yeah, thank you for the correction. We would have been looking at a Cat 4, possibly a Cat 3 by the time it would have got off the other side of the Kyushu area.
And switching... I'm sorry.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that area has seen a Cat 4 since Yancy of 1993.
Well, I'm usually good with the history, but it's beyond me this time. It must have been a little while. What I wanted to go on to next was Lekima, obviously, the other big system, and of course I've mentioned it already tonight. But the models were earlier, I mean, 1 or 2, like the HWRF and things like that, were talking about Category 4 for Taiwan, and indeed the GFS with potentially Category 4 pressures. What's everyone's thoughts on that right now regards its future?
Currently, the HWRF does support that with roughly looking about mid-Category 4, 942, maybe 936 millibars 3 days out. However, the difference between the GFS and HWRF is the HWRF does take it north of Taiwan and looking at more of a mainland China landfall versus the GFS, which is looking at a direct landfall on northern Taiwan in the same time frame.
If you look at this image here, you can see the expected percentage chances of tropical storm force winds. The confidence is beginning to increase that it's going to dart off towards the northwest and affect Taiwan. It might yet miss and strike the southernmost Ryukyu Islands of Japan, and as I alluded to in an earlier update, with 11W forming as well, all three of these typhoons could affect Japanese islands as significant typhoons even. If this one strengthens markedly as some of us might be expecting, it could be Category 3 over the Miyakojima Islands. And for 11W, it's going to be a massive typhoon if it does get to Typhoon 10. It's going to be huge. And that could go on to affect the Ogasawara Islands as well, Tim. You've been monitoring that too. We had a little chat beforehand.
Yes, actually, all three of these systems I've been keeping an eye on since the Atlantic is pretty much non-existent.
I just want to point out that Iwajima already has just over a 60% chance of tropical storm conditions from 11W.
Yeah, so
it's only just started.
Right, and
that's
that's
a GFS run for 11W, and the pressures it's predicting.
Would you be able to show us at all?
Yes.
Eventually. Tim, go ahead whilst Max loads that.
Yeah, I was actually gonna echo off of that. I can actually pull the models up. I actually have the HWRF in front of me here, so let me
all right,
do a quick screen share
so
here.
you're both... Oh.
Yeah, and we'll initialize this as of where we're at. I might have to actually shrink this down. I'm used to having it a little bit bigger for the US updates. But
all right,
this is 11...
Hold on, Max got there first, so let's take a look at what he's showing us. Go ahead, Max.
I'll go and get the models for Lekima then while he's doing 11W.
Yeah, as you can see,
this is the GFS model.
The GFS model, yes. It seems to be predicting a somewhat quick intensification, and the pressures it's indicating would seem to suggest really anywhere from maybe strong Cat 3 to mid-range Cat 4.
944. With a storm of that size, if it does end up being as huge as we think it's going to be, you would expect, to be honest, it's saying 89 knots there, which is 105 miles an hour. That seems pretty reasonable for a storm that big.
Yeah, it does seem reasonable. I think looking at the HWRF, when I was looking at it early for 11W, the potential eye is really massive that it's easily going to make a direct landfall on the Ogasawara Islands and may not even lose any intensity at all.
Here was an earlier graphic of the spread of those models just before it got that designation, and you can see there's a bit of a consensus up to 48 hours, but after that they spread out quite a bit, really. And you can still see that there's still some potential for the storm could strike eastern parts of Honshu. Looking at those intensity guidances again, they're all going a bit low there, actually. I'm quite surprised.
Yeah, that is definitely underestimating this. Just from if we go by the pressure variance, you're easily looking at a Cat 4, but what the models may not be taking into consideration is the pressures will be there, but by the time it does get to the Ogasawaras, that wind field may have not mixed down to the surface.
All right. I think we're now joined by Thomas. Hello.
Hello, Nathan. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me on. Very active tropics, much more active today than it was a week ago. And lots of rising motion in the Western Pacific, leading to what could be some quite powerful systems. 11W W in particular, I think, has some potential to really become more powerful, especially around the day 3 to 5 period. But we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see what exactly all of these storms do. Especially, here, let me look. I haven't been keeping the closest track of these, but I know that
Here's the latest
Lekima
satellite imagery of 11W right now, and it is gathering pace. I think that one could intensify very soon, the tropical storm intensity.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Just fine, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was basically just going to say that I think Lekima could become more powerful than model guidance is saying it's going to. And I think that the biggest supporter of this really is the conditions that it's surrounded by. I would have to make the assumption that sea surface temperatures haven't changed much in the past week, and that those are going to be just fine for this.
Oh yes, definitely.
Which, yeah, they are. Sea surface temperatures are abundant for. And wind shear, as of right now, is low, especially on the northern side. And if the ridge that's near Taiwan goes near to the system, I think shear could continue to decrease. And I think more rapid intensification than what models are predicting is possible, especially given that models all the time like to underestimate the potential intensity of storms. I mean, just look at Barbara. Maximum intensity from model guidance at the beginning of Barbara's life throughout a 10-day period was category 2. So it's to say that this, when it's maximum possible intensity according to models, is category 2 at the moment, and that's the UK Met. But category 1 by what I think is still one of the best intensity-based models out there, the H1. I mean, it's not that out of the question that this could intensify further into a category 2 or 3.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
The same
probably-
HWRF wanted a borderline category 4 just off the coast of Japan in the form of Francisco.
Oh, jeez.
I'm not saying
JTWC
it
are
doesn't
only-
make mistakes and it doesn't overblow things, but
I
when
want to like the HWRF because I did in 2017 when it was Model of the Year, but it isn't at the moment.
JTWC are only predicting a peak of 65 knots for Lekima at the moment.
Yes. And that is actually up from the previous forecast. And to talk about the HWRF for Lekima is Tim.
Yes, Nathan, and I know you guys are a little skeptical on the H-Wharf, but we will run it through. This is the 18Z that we have on the screen as we do play it out. It is going to take it in towards the area of Taiwan, easily making Category 1 typhoon status, possibly even making Category 2 right before it does get to the tip of Taiwan. There, it's right about 942 millibars at 3 days out, which that would be easily, if you were in the Atlantic, that's easily Cat 4. Pacific, I know we look at deeper pressure, so this is probably going to be about a Cat 3, right
Low
between,
to mid-range Cat 3.
Yeah, right between Taiwan and the Miyako-jima Islands. And the H-Wharf wants to take it north of Taiwan. The GFS wants to take it further south into the northern part of Taiwan. And actually, seeing that this is actually fully initialized, it actually keeps us right around mid-Cat 3, right into mainland China. So,
What was that minimum pressure there? Did I see a 933?
yes, you did. 933 just to the north of Taiwan at 3.5 days out. So you're talking,
So that's a category 4.
yeah, right at 21Z, which would be 9 a.m. Actually, by 8 a.m. Taiwan local time on the 9th.
Now, one of the reasons why we are expecting that the CDPS scale is going with stage 7 right now on Lekima is because of the rainfall potential. And we look at it on the screen there, Tim, it's dumping a huge amount of rainfall on the HWRF model as well. We're expecting potentially over 20 inches of rain, nearly 30 inches of rain in Taiwan in particular. What's the HWRF saying?
Well, I actually have the HWRF for rainfall pulled up on my screen. Maximum rainfall it's calling for a maximum projected is 58.6 inches, but I highly doubt we're going to get 58 inches all in one area. But there are
No, well, I'll
some
tell you what. An
areas.
earlier run said 97 inches. Yeah, okay.
Oh my.
But there are some areas
Out
you
at
can
sea,
see. Yeah, you got some of those darker purples where that's 32 inches plus.
And
You
there's a
may
few of
see
those over the Taiwanese mountains as well.
Yep, and also into the southern provinces of mainland China. So stage
And
7
Tim,
definitely does verify out.
just in case it becomes significant later down the line, a small difference between the model run that you were showing before and the one now. You're looking at the 12Z HWRF on that tab, and on your other one it's
Yeah.
the 18.
Yeah, that was
latest
the
one.
12. Yeah, that was the 12Z rainfall, and here's the 18Z GFS as well.
Okay,
And
yep.
yeah, and there, right there, you're looking at easily a Taiwan landfall right in the northern corner, with GFS initializing at 953 millibars at 72 hours out. So Taiwan, you could either probably be looking at a category 2 or 3. It's just going to be a matter of whether it's going to hit you directly or if it's going to skirt just to the north.
Yeah, it's going to be somewhere towards the north by the looks of things. And you know that obviously Taipei is on the northern tip of Taiwan, so that doesn't look good for the main city there for the time being. But models can flip about, and earlier today, or was it last night's tropical weather bulletin, I mentioned how the models were being hopeless, and maybe they could flip about again in the time to come. But it seems pretty clear at this stage that somewhere is going to get some pretty bad conditions out of this.
Yeah, and the CMC appears to be taking Lekima towards the Ryukyu Islands, then sort of out to sea, and then sort of loops it back towards the Ryukyu Islands.
Oh dear.
And while we were discussing 11W a little bit ago, this is what I was showing for that one.
On the HWRF.
Yeah, on the HWRF. Yeah.
Has loads of eye walls, my goodness. It can't get itself sorted.
Now, and somewhere under all this is the Agasawaras, I believe, somewhere in the midst of all this.
Crikey.
But if the models do play this out, we could be looking at something very intense out of 11W. That's the HWRF GFS for...
Intense is the operative word, because it might be not particularly strong in miles per hour, but it could get very intense in terms of minimal central pressure, which is how those words are actually defined.
Yeah, and there you go. Looking at the GFS there, Nathan. I mean, this thing, if this verifies by the GFS, this thing's going to have a massive eye.
Yes. An
You're
enormous
talking
donut.
probably... Yeah, enormous donut. 30, 40 miles wouldn't be out of the question. And you can see, I believe those are the Ogasawara Islands there on the north of it at 5 days out. And it's looking like it's going to take a direct landfall.
Tim,
But then again, as you guys have said, that these models can deviate.
I want to bring us back to Lekima's forecast. This is one of the more recent forecasts, and compared to last night, it's the first time I've really looked at this properly. I must say that the model consensus is there a lot more today than it was yesterday, with only 2 or 3 outliers, CMC being one of them, for Lekima's track. So, upon looking at this imagery, I'm not sure if the GFS is in this or not, but GFS is also calling for pretty much Taiwanese landfall. Pretty much all the models there, all the main models, are calling for a very close pass or a landfall in Taiwan. So I think that is a new development in the last 24 hours at least. And then on to China in the usual fashion, as many storms have done in the past, but it could be very intense when it does happen.
Yeah, the Euro actually does something quite interesting. So what it shows is, because we have this new invest, I believe we have something new in the South China Sea,
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken.
96W.
Yeah, 96W. It's a broader low at the moment, and the European actually initializes this, gathering some strength, which is interesting. But what the Euro predicts, and it honestly isn't that out of the question, is that Lekima absorbs it. So as Lekima heads north, this, because the low is so broad and Lekima is so large, they do kind of a Fujiwara effect. And because 96W is not organized, it pretty much gets absorbed. As a result, as it gets absorbed, as it heads north and closer in, it nudges the storm northward, so just north of Taiwan, and it kind of does a loop-de-loop kind of thing just to the north of Taiwan before heading into China, which is intriguing because if it did that, that would also result in stalling, and that would also result in very high amounts of rainfall. I can actually get some rain totals here in just a moment. So if I take a look at rain totals from this, I'm seeing about 25 inches out of the Euro, which isn't completely out of the question. And then as this goes into China, well over 20 inches can be expected according to the Euro and the GFS. GFS also in general agreement with a 15 to 20 inch rainfall total at the least occurring in Taiwan and China. So rainfall potential is going to be extremely high.
Absolutely, and that's why we've got this down as a stage 7. You know, I've just made some sort of curious link in my head right now, because we were looking back at just how quiet a start we've had in the Western Pacific so far, and we were comparing it with years. And towards the end of July, there had only been this year, I think, one storm that had reached 50 mile an hour, 10-minute sustained winds by the JMA, right? And that was at the end of July. And if that continued into the first week of August, which it did, it would be the latest second storm to reach that intensity since 1916, and that has happened. But some of the years that were competing with this year for that were years like 1998, 1995, and 1975, which of course had Typhoon Nina in early August as well. And that dumped a huge amount of rain over Taiwan and China. Of course, the dam failing caused much more in the way of terror than anything else. But it goes to show that maybe this sort of situation... I don't know, is there all this moisture banked or something because the storms have been so weak?
Well, what's happened is there's a lot of sinking air going into the Western Pacific. And what's happening is when you have sinking air, things are obviously very hot in the Western Pacific. And when there was all that sinking air, you had lots of water that was evaporating, but there wasn't enough buoyancy for it to go anywhere. So you had all this moisture trapped at the surface. That's why we had such awful heat waves over in India and China. There was a lot of moisture, a lot of humidity down at the surface, which really did exacerbate heat over there. And as a result of that, now that we do have rising air, all of that already accumulated moisture has gone up into the air, and then there's all kinds of more moisture, as we know, that's going to be headed up into the air as we do approach the peak of the Northern Hemisphere season for tropical cyclones.
Yes, indeed, it's not very far away at this point. But there we are. Alright, if you've got any questions and comments for us whilst we're on the air today, we'll take them actually in... yes. Shall we take them? Okay. We'll take some questions and comments here. Let's see what we've got. Oh, yes. Someone asking about the Discord server. You can join our Discord server at any time. It's underneath our video. And we are going to go and take a very short break here as well, I think. Okay, no, that's not working. Okay, we'll stay on the air. We like to have a break every now and then. Alright, let's see if we can get more comments and questions. Type in Force 13 all in text. I know there was a lot earlier on. What is this storm in the Atlantic that everyone in the chat is talking about? Anyone like to comment on that?
Honestly, that is news to me. Let me actually take a look and see what
Oh
they're
no, is it
calling
the
for.
storm in the MDR?
96L is still a thing in the Eastern
I
Caribbean.
don't know. Are they
You can
talking
see
about
it
a
there.
storm
There's,
in MDR?
I don't know. Are they referring to the thing in the Atlantic? Because there's a relatively strong low in the northern Atlantic right now. It's not that strong, actually. It's at about 1,007 millibars, according to observations over the ocean
there
right now.
does
It's going to
seem to
be
be
really rapidly strengthening as it slams into the United Kingdom by around Friday,
Oh, no.
mid-Friday.
They're talking
does
about
seem
that.
to be
Maybe that's what they're talking about. That's
rather-
that's the biggest news I'm seeing in the Atlantic Ocean right now.
there does seem to be a rather compact low in the main development region.
Development prospects don't look very good for it.
Cities would confirm it is a circulation, even though not the best. And I'm getting 23 knot wind.
Well,
in
I
the
don't think
south
that conversation's
of it.
going very far, to be honest.
Yeah.
The Atlantic's pretty dead at the minute. We can assure you of that.
Yeah.
No, and I'm looking at the GFS over the next 5 days. It's not picking up on anything noticeable. I mean, we might get a little bit something of a frontal zone that's coming off the U.S. that might develop into maybe a bit of a decent low pressure system, but it's not going to really amount to anything. And what you were talking about, Thomas, yeah, there is going to be a low pressure system. It's going to drop to about 982 millibars that will hit into Ireland and the UK in about 4 or 5 days. So you're going to get some really good rain out of that.
A question that came in that actually is immediately relevant. Is there any more countries that will be impacted apart from Japan and South Korea? I assume they're referring to Francisco alone. Well, it could impact North Korea and maybe even Russia as a remnant, but it's more likely that it will then turn back towards Hokkaido as a remnant low. Another interesting question there. Hurricanes in the Northwest Pacific due to climate change, yes or no? Well, typhoons have always existed in the Northwest Pacific, but whether they're being influenced or not is another debate entirely.
I'm going to actually chip into this a little bit. Let's hope that this doesn't start some sort of big fiery debate with someone. But
now that what you did...
We won't.
Yeah, it's pretty much it's a no, and the reason why is because global temperature hasn't risen that much, and while extremes have been exacerbated a little, what we're seeing is this is not entirely uncommon. How far north these sea surface temperatures are stretching is slightly uncommon for this time of year to see such warm sea surface temperatures off like the coast of Japan, for example, at least in my experience. But what we're seeing is we're also seeing a cool pool, if I'm not mistaken, on the eastern side of the West Pacific. At least that's what I would think would make sense. Relatively speaking, it's a cooler pool. But it has to do more with the pattern than it does with climate change. I mean, climate change is not something that's really going to be overly impactful to the immediate future, or even the next few decades, when it comes to the way the tropical cyclones overall interact with the atmosphere.
Another question here, not a question actually, more of a comment, and I want to point it out. I don't think Francisco was a category 1 with that eye. It has to be stronger than that. And we agree. We initially put it as a category 2 when it made landfall. We've now put it down to category 1 because it appears to be weakening substantially quickly, just as much as it's strengthened.
I'd honestly have to say, though, there is a case for a Cat 1 landfall.
Potentially.
I'm not saying that I 100% agree with it, but I'd say there's a case. And it's because when storms rapidly intensify, their structure obviously is much better. It's much more organized. But what happens is it goes from the upper to the lower levels. It's the upper level clouds that are clearing that are allowing for the eye. The lower level clouds have been cleared forever. So what's happening is it's upper level organization more than lower level organization that's needed for wind increase. So what that means is that when the upper levels organize, the winds are going to begin to increase and the pressure is going to fall at the upper levels, not
Right.
the lower levels at first.
Thomas, as we continue to look at the sea surface temperatures on the screen, let me take some more questions. Do we think that Lekima will reach 150 miles an hour? Whoa there. That is,
Probably not.
you know,
but
you can't rule anything
wouldn't
out,
rule it
but
out. I'd say
Yeah.
probably
would be-
not, but I wouldn't rule it out.
it would be scaremongering of us if we said that it would get anywhere near that intensity as an operational forecast. It is unlikely. What else do we have?
And while you are discussing that, yeah, I do have the chart of the sea surface temperatures up, and to kind of allude to what you were talking about, Thomas, about seeing the sea surface temperatures being in a very uncommon area. I mean, you're seeing 29 degrees Celsius sea surface temperatures off the coast of the Kyushu and Honshu prefectures, which is where we saw Francisco make its, what I would say is a pretty incredible run from a mid to high tropical storm up to our analysis as a Cat 2. You normally don't see those kind of temperatures up this far north this time of year, and I do agree with you, Thomas, that the temperatures have been really uncommonly spread out over the Westpac this season.
So we're again looking at those sea surface temperatures whilst I figure out why the break music didn't work before, and now I have found out why. Excellent. So that'll be fixed if we have another hour of streaming tonight. Where should we move to next? I mean, if we want to spend just a few seconds at least talking about Tropical Depression Flossie.
Or what's left of it.
Well, it's had some decent convective bursts today. As you can see, the center of this depression, is it still a depression, by the way? The center of this thing is just north of the big island of Hawaii and could move through the Hawaiian Islands, so it looks like it will pass just north now. The convection's well displaced on the eastern side. If it was a bit further south, that could have been causing maybe some problems in on the islands with flash flooding and whatnot, but looks like it's going to miss completely.
If you want to talk about Flossie, it's just swirly out in the middle of nowhere that the CPHC he just doesn't want to admit is dead.
It's right next to Hawaii, so I wouldn't say it's out in the middle of nowhere, but it's it's not completely dead,
Just a minute. If anyone is in Hawaii right now and wants to complain to Max, then please let us know. Go ahead.
I was basically going to say, at least by my standards,
Sorry, Max.
this is a tropical depression. Still, how long it's going to be able to retain that intensity is unknown. But like Nathan was saying before, there have been some relatively impressive convective flare-ups, and there's a dry line or a boundary of sorts that's formed on the eastern side of Flossie. It's allowing for more convection to develop now on the southern side, and therefore it could actually get some more substantial convection over it as it heads northward. Will it be able to redevelop into even a tropical storm? No way. It's not going to manage to. But for it to be able to produce some significant land effects, such as rain, to the Hawaiian Islands and maybe even some higher tides, is not that unlikely at all. It's actually more likely than not, in my opinion. And it's definitely something of interest, to say the least. So I think that Flossie could be a rainmaker for Hawaii, especially since we are starting to see that convection fire off on the eastern side. But it's going to be interesting to see, I guess, over the next few hours what Flossie does.
So the top stories tonight, I'm sorry Tim, just to reiterate for any new viewers, the top stories tonight: Typhoon Francisco made landfall not so long ago in Kyushu. It's already making good progress through the island, and is weakening substantially. Tropical storm Lekima is intensifying and could become a significant typhoon on approach to Taiwan or the southernmost Japanese islands, and 11W is likely to get named soon and could strike the Ogasawara Islands of Japan as well, and could be a significant typhoon too. 96W is also located in the South China Sea, and Tropical Depression Flossie is slowly dying near Hawaii. Imagery?
Imagery of Flossie.
There's a radar picture on our screen now.
Yeah, I was actually piggybacking off what you were talking about, Thomas, about some of the interaction with the rain effects. And this is the next rad radar out of Kamahuela, and you can see some of Flossie's effects are making it onto the Big Island up into some of the other Hawaiian islands. So even though Flossie may not look great on satellite, it is still has enough of influence to be dropping some rain in and around the Big Island and other islands of Hawaii.
All right, I also believe that we're now joined by Devon. Hello?
Yes, I have arrived here for an appearance on the stream.
It's been so long.
I'm just taking a look at images. I know it's been a while since I've been on. Right now, I'm just scanning through a couple of images.
We've got a question here that might be lined up for you.
Yes.
Actually, I want your opinion at least. A question that came in here saying CSU is saying signs are showing of a season similar to 1992. What do you think the chances are of an Andrew-like storm?
Well,
Good place to start.
that is an amazing place to start. Well, storms like Andrew, Michael, Camille, Labor Day hurricane. Those are the four Cat 5s that made landfall in the United States. There's a reason why there's only been 4 of them. They are incredibly rare, and they require just a perfect set of conditions. And another thing that it's always required is that it requires the storms to be very small. Andrew was a very compact storm. Michael was a very compact storm. Camille was a very compact storm.
Francisco
Labor Day
almost did the
hurricane.
same right here. If it had more time
Francisco
and
is
space.
another one of those compact storms hitting Japan. How that reached typhoon status, that's
warm
a different
sea
story.
surface temperatures, low wind shear.
And tiny system, but still, that considering its fast movement and that I'm surprised that there's low wind shear in that condition, considering its fast movement. But that
It did slow
it's
down
the West
before
Pacific.
striking, but anyway, you were going to make a different
It's
point.
West Pacific. Yeah, the point that I'm trying to make here is that the Category 5s, especially in the Atlantic, you can't make any projection about that. What the 1992 projection more or less means, it doesn't mean that there's going to be, big Cat 5, in the middle of August. That's not necessarily what that means. If you take a look back at the 1992 Atlantic hurricane season, you can make a couple of observations. The Caribbean was dead. Gulf of Mexico is dead. We saw virtually no formation there. Any of the formation is going to have to come from deeper out in the Atlantic Ocean, and almost all the formation is going to be in the subtropics. Now, we've already had, this has already been broken a little bit because of the previous storms that we've had. But if we're going to have a season similar to 1992, what we would be looking for is more subtropical developments. And really that entire stretch between 1990 and 1994 was, I think that there was only a couple of hurricanes that formed in that time frame that was actually of tropical origin, and I think Andrew was one of them, and there's a couple of others maybe. So that entire stretch in the early 90s was very hostile to Cape Verde type storms, and Andrew just happened to be a very small storm in the right place at the right time, and it blew up. I mean, it almost died out at the Lesser Antilles. So That's the thing that
True.
a lot of people don't remember about Andrew is
It
that
was
they
true,
think,
yeah.
oh, Cat 5, hit Florida, massive storm. The thing wasn't even a hurricane 72 hours before landfall.
Yeah.
So that's something you have to consider with Andrew. The thing wasn't even a hurricane 72 hours before landfall. So if you're looking forward to 1992 season, I wouldn't expect an Andrew type storm. I would expect a lot of subtropical base systems. That's pretty much what that means. And
So
didn't we have a
Atlantic
record
fans,
amount?
Atlantic
Didn't we
fans are
have
going
a
to be so
record amount of
pleased.
subtropical systems last year?
Yeah, in 2018.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah. Well, maybe we're in another one of those subtropical patterns. But right now, I'm taking a look at soon to be Typhoon Lekima here.
Yes.
It's already. Oh, never mind.
Yeah,
Nope, not yet.
this is really what I think the main focus is going to end up being on, because it's looking like it's going to be a very significant rainfall threat to Taiwan here, regardless if it ends up actually making landfall on the Big Island or not. You know that storms like to play dodgeball around the island because of the massive. It's true, because you have the massive elevations there on the island that go well up over 10,000 feet. It's going to disrupt the storm significantly, and you usually see storms weaken rapidly as they head towards the island. So obviously, Lekima, it's not going to have a lot of time to develop. But taking a look at its current satellite imagery presentation, we've got a really nice CDO here, maybe a little bit of shear from the north here, kind of preventing some development here to the north. That seems to be the only inhibitor I see at this point, is that a weak northern half, but really a southern half that's just beautifully defined here. A great CDO with cloud tops getting over minus 80 degrees Celsius, and actually they're trying to hit minus 90. They're not quite getting there.
Now, Devon, we're looking at Lekima on the screen here, but it doesn't tell exactly the full story. ASCAP passes earlier showing that even though it's not all tropical storm force, there is a lot of 30-knot winds extending way far out from the center, a huge wind field. Could that put a handbrake on any intensification?
I don't. Taking a look at it on satellite, the thing is that I do see that, especially on the western edge of this storm, and you can really see it on the microwave imagery, that this storm does have a very large area of influence. You can really see it on the microwave imagery. But if you take a look at the core, is a pretty compact. You have a very pretty compact core here with the storm, and you can see that in the CDO as well. So even though the gales might be extending out quite a bit, you really want to take a look at the core of the storm, and you can see that the core is pretty tight here. So the storm's definitely looking good. The forward path, this time of year, heading towards Taiwan, the sea surface temperatures are above 30, and that
roughly
this is a prime area for typhoons to develop very quickly. So we'll have to keep an eye on Lekima over the next 24 to 48 hours. I wouldn't count out, say that a typhoon in 24 hours. I don't think that's out of the question. How far it gets up after the 24 hours, that's really hard. But right now, taking a look at the microwave imagery, loving it.
All right. Anyone else with anything they'd like to add at this point?
No.
I mean, I think that Lekima is probably going to become the primary focus of news, because I think, at least in my opinion, it has the highest chance of becoming a very significant threat. And I think it already is a very significant threat to Taiwan. Regardless of how intense it gets, rainfall is going to be immense with it. And like Devin said, it's got a large area of influence and a compact core. So it's kind of got the downsides, if you're a person in Taiwan, of both a large and small storm. It's got the ability to intensify quickly, and it's also got a very large wind field, as well as a large area that rain can fall from. And because there's so much moisture right now just lingering in the Western Pacific, this is going to be a real rainmaker.
And also looking forward, taking a look at TD11W here, it's going to stay mainly to the east of whatever Lekima is going to do here. So it's not going to end up following the cold water trail of Lekima and weaken here. It's going to stay well to the east, and it looks like that it's also going to be a pretty large system that's kind of out here, and looks like that it's going to be staying pretty close to the northern Marianas Islands for quite a bit. I know that the northern half of the Marianas are generally uninhabited, so it's not necessarily that big of a concern, but the storm is looking like it might snake its way northward towards Japan, but that's a bit too far out to see what the storm's going to be doing. But looks like TD11W might be another storm we need to keep an eye on.
And behind any of these systems, is there anything else that could emerge? Or will there be, is this a phase that we've got right now, and then we're going to get a trough phase, a lower phase of nothing happening?
Phase. No. Well, I'm taking a look at the GFS. I see nothing. I'll just say nothing and move on because
Yeah,
I'm
pretty
not
much.
seeing anything in the near
Interesting.
future.
Well,
So I think
bodes
that
well
the
for
West
my
Pacific is
vacation
good on
next
that.
week, but not much else with these two systems that do pose a significant threat. Now, 11W, what do you think? Anyone could answer this question right now. That the potential chances of 11W striking Japan, the main islands as well.
Would you want a percentage?
Just maybe an analysis of what could maybe steer it towards the islands, perhaps, if anything.
So I think that really what it's going to be is Lekima that would help steer it towards the islands. I mean, they're both very large. They're both going to interact with each other. I mean, on a surface analysis map, you can see they interact with each other.
Just a moment,
there's looking
Thomas.
at isobar.
Is that Tim's screen share still there?
Yeah, it is.
And you're showing us the latest GFS run, which is actually calling for a landfall in Japan, right?
Yeah, let me run this back. This is actually.
I was just watching
18...
it as you were talking there.
Yeah, this is the 18Z. Obviously, the 979. That's Francisco. You got Lekima there at 984. Yep. 11W is the 997 there, and as we run this through,
it gets huge, obviously.
Yeah, by the pressures I'm looking at, that's easily Category 3.
And that, well,
but yeah, it does look like that about. Now, this is kind of getting into the realm of fake news territory for us because we really don't look anything beyond 7 days.
It's close for comfort at any rate.
Yes, I mean, it does look like we may get a couple highs that could build him back behind 11W. You got a blocking high up here in just off of Siberia that could actually block it in and could take it right into mainland Honshu at about 192 hours out, but that's getting a little beyond what I would consider a definitive model guidance.
It entirely depends on the strength of the ridge that ends up building to the east of it.
Exactly.
If the blocking ridge ends up being as strong as it says it's going to, it's obviously going to push the storm directly into Japan. But if it ends up being weaker than forecast, then we're not really going to have to worry about it hitting Japan. And it also depends on the strength of the storm. The stronger it is, the more it's going to interact with that ridge. The weaker the storm, the less the ridge is going to matter. So if it's stronger, it's more than likely going to be pushed towards Japan. If it's weaker, it's probably going back out.
That's interesting.
Indeed, Devin. And just looking, and this is just the whole 500 millibar geopotential guidance. If we actually look at the GFS off of the actual 11W, The 12Z actually had it taking it out to sea. And it looks like
yes,
the
it did. It
18Z
did. I remember.
Yeah, the 12Z did actually have it going out to sea. Now it does actually look like the 18Z right at 7 days, which is kind of about the maximum comfort zone that I like looking at it. Does have this as a minimal typhoon by the time it does get up towards what may be mainland Honshu, possibly even Tokyo, maybe a little south of there. But that's well beyond 7 days, though.
Yes, that would be
So,
very good.
So I just want to clarify something that I said earlier with Nathan. I know that you kind of thought about it and thought like, oh, why would the storm strength matter in where the storm ends up going? Well, what ends up happening here is that the forces that are actually put onto the storm is directly proportional to the pressure gradient in between the two systems, and whenever the storm ends up becoming stronger, obviously there's going to be a greater pressure gradient, a greater difference in pressure, and therefore a greater force. So that would, and since it's a blocking high, it's not like it's a low which ends up attracting it. The high is basically like a repellent. So the stronger the storm is, the more it's actually going to be pushed away by the high.
Right. How interesting.
So that's a little bit of dynamics being thrown in there.
Indeed, Devin, and that is something that really caught my attention because I was looking at this last night off of the 18Z run, and it did not have any kind of high building in it. It had 11W just skirting the Japanese coastline, probably by a couple hundred miles, and then just harmlessly moving out into the North Central Pacific, with this high now being put into the equation. It really does change the dynamics of what 11W could do. And as you said, the strength of that ridge is really going to determine if it's going to skirt away harmlessly or if Japan could be looking at something possibly 5-6 days down the road.
Here is imagery, more imagery of Typhoon Francisco as it moves through the rest of Kyushu right now. And we are just about coming up to the end of our hour here, which I completely missed the timing of, so we're trying to rectify that now. Okay, great. But there we go. That was our Tropical Weather Bulletin Hour Live. We're staying on the air here at Force 13 HQ with some more coverage on what's going on in Typhoon Alley this morning. Stay tuned for more. Coverage continues in a moment. You can follow Force 13's outlets, the website force13.com, our YouTube page, youtube.com/Force13, on Facebook under the same name, Force13, and our Twitter handle, it's @Force13 if you wish to get in touch. You can also add Force13 on Skype and my personal account on Discord, Fool13, at extension 9094. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Yes, you saw my name flash underneath the screen there. I wasn't quite ready for you. This is more coverage on Typhoon Francisco and Tropical Storm Lekima. Our second hour of full coverage tonight. The first hour was branded as a Tropical Weather Bulletin because that is our usual time slot for that. But we thought we would be doing some live coverage to really keep you up to date with what's going on. Of course, Francisco moving over land. It hasn't been over Kyushu for very long, and it's only about an hour or two at most from leaving and then heading towards South Korea. We'll be talking about that along with loads of other things tonight, as we have been doing in the first hour. We're here again in the second. My name is Nathan Foy. I'm joined by the team tonight consisting of Tim, Max, Justin, Thomas and Devon. Good evening to you all once again.
Good evening.
Oh,
Good evening.
Good evening. It's great to be here.
Indeed. So we've really discussed a lot in the last hour, and maybe any more observations that you guys can make at the top of this hour. Anything new?
I don't really have anything new. I've pretty much said exactly what I've needed to say. Like I said in the previous hour, Lekima is pretty impressive right now with its current appearance on not just microwave but satellite imagery as well. And we also have TD11W, which looks like it could end up blossoming into being a large storm in the middle of the Pacific. And we have Tiny Francisco here going across Japan at a rather rapid rate, and it ended up intensifying into a typhoon, which is pretty impressive considering its forward rate of speed and location.
I'm not sure it is that impressive. It did slow down just before the landfall when it was intensifying.
Yeah.
I wasn't keeping too close tabs on Francisco. I just know that it was a fast-moving storm in the jet stream. They usually don't know when to say stop.
The key hour or two that it was intensifying, it had slowed down significantly. On the screen on our right-hand side now is more radar imagery. In fact, I shouldn't say more because we haven't actually seen any so far during our stream. I assume it's provided to us again by Tim.
Yes, it is, Nathan. This is the radar out of the Kyushu Prefecture region, courtesy of the JMA, where we are seeing some spots getting 50 millimeters per hour.
Wow.
Through some of the prefectures.
That's impressive. That's a really impressive
Work out
rain.
bad. Then they should be looking out for.
Any particular areas that you can point out there at all?
I do know the city of Nagasaki is over here. I believe when I was
not a huge amount of rain on the western side there.
No, I think the next couple cities that I remember is the city of Hirodo on the northern side of the Kyushu prefectures. That would probably be the next area that is going to get the worst of all this once it actually gets through.
Devon, there is, just changing gear again here, one other thing that you haven't yet spoken about with us, and that's how at the moment we're putting Tropical Storm Lekima as a stage 7 on the CDPS, owing mainly to that rainfall and the very large wind field. Your thoughts on that?
Well, that would not surprise me. A lot of storms, they end up forming in this region, and they get quite big, and they get quite intense. The always big unpredictability about these storms is that they're going to be rather large, and that they're going to dump a lot of rain, and their wind field is likely going to increase upon landfall because the wind speed itself is going to rapidly decrease as you end up moving towards those 10,000-foot mountains that exist in Taiwan. So the real question ends up being is how much does Lekima interact with Taiwan, and that's really going to end up determining what the official CDPS rating is going to be in this. But right now, projected to be a stage 7 upon impact with Taiwan, which is obviously very significant impacts to be expected. Even 4 is typically significant.
And that's
7
what Francisco is.
Yes, and Francisco is a 4, and we have a 7 here in the form of Lekima, which can be a very devastating tropical cyclone. Luckily, most of the population on Taiwan is on the western side, so they're more than likely not going to get most of the winds, and they're not going to get a ton of surge, and they're on the other side of the mountain. But obviously, there's still coastal communities on the eastern side of the island, and they absolutely can't be ignored.
Something that I'm noticing here, Devin, as I'm running through the H4 for the viewers, is we were talking about that blocking high with Francisco. I'm noticing at about 3 days out that the H4 has Lekima taking more of a southwesterly track. Could we attribute that to possibly that blocking ridge moving further west and influencing Lekima once it gets past Taiwan?
I don't think that's going to be the main factor there, bringing Lekima. The main factor once Lekima approaches Taiwan is going to be Taiwan itself. As counterintuitive as that might sound, that's going to be the main steering factor with Lekima approaching Taiwan is going to be how specifically the storm impacts with Taiwan. As far as the blocking high, if anything, it's going to be more influenced by our buddy here, TD11 to the east, and the high is on the other side of TD11. So that blocking high is really not going to affect anything there. And the ridge that's located over Tibet is far, far inland, and it doesn't look like it's anywhere near as strong as the Mid-Pacific Ridge, which is well to the east of T11. So that's not going to be the main steering factor here. The main steering factor is going to be specifically how this storm interacts with the mountains of Taiwan.
All right, well, taking a look at it, it does look like 3 days out, it does glance off of the northern tip of Taiwan and then kind of parallels around the northern edge of it before making what could be a direct landfall in mainland China, probably as a Category 1 or Category 2.
Sounds about right for. I don't know if it's going to maintain
That track
that.
must be
It
very
depends on how
similar.
much it strengthens.
That track must be very similar to Maria of last year.
I don't know. I'd actually have to do some research on that.
Anyway, I've got to just grab some Facebook comments because Dave has not been here for a while and I've got to monitor it for him. There was a question earlier. Does the lack of Atlantic activity mean a below average season? And are we expecting a well below average season due to an El Nino and persistent dry Sahara dust?
2004. That's all I'm going to say. Next question.
Yes, well, to get a 2004, it has to start soon,
last
though,
year.
doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm not going to say,
Like,
that
we're
it's
in
going to be
real
completely
danger.
dead.
We're in real danger, Devon, if we get towards the last 2 weeks, last 1 week of August and still haven't seen anything really beyond a weak tropical storm form.
Yeah, I would
had-
say that would be more
We've
in
had
trouble.
a dreadful subtropical storm called Andrea, the
Yeah.
worst-looking hurricane in over a decade, and
That was a hurricane?
yeah, and almost, and the hype bandwagon people who went hashtag Chantal 4 times in a row have had egg on their faces 4 times in a row, and it's still yet to form. So
That was a
that's-
hurricane.
That's the kind of season the Atlantic's had so far.
I know that there was supposed to be one storm that was going towards the Lesser Antilles. I think it had like 70-80% on it, and then it just
That's
poof.
this one, 96L, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it
Yeah,
was,
it was.
whatever it ended up being. You know, I know that there was
91L.
whichever one of the L's it was. It wasn't too long ago when it
Gee.
was like a 70-80%
92L.
chance. But yeah, 90 something L. That's all that really matters, is that it was
Alright.
designated as a 90.
If you've got any comments or questions for us whilst we're on the air in our second hour of coverage tonight, send us a message to our chat section. And apart from that, you can of course join our Discord server as well, and all the other links that are presented underneath our chat. If you missed the last hour, that it was in the tropical weather bulletin slot, so that replaces the usual tropical weather bulletin we did a whole hour just before. That hour of coverage will be publicly viewable again on catch up shortly on our YouTube channel as well. Alright, where should we go next? Well, actually looking at this latest or recent imagery from the Navy, showing the latest look at, well, it just went by, Francisco. There it is again. Looking at it right now, how strong do you think it is? Do you think it might still be a typhoon looking at this?
It's been over land for too long.
You don't
Regardless
think
of what it looks like on satellite, it's been over land for too long.
so?
I would have to say it's probably just below typhoon status. If I actually had to put an actual figure on it, I'd say probably no more than 65 miles per hour at most currently would be my estimate.
I want to see if I can get some nice polar images here.
And if
Yeah,
you've not had proper time to look at the track maps from the JTWC yet, I'll go through them slowly. This is the track map for Francisco, and you can see what's expected of it there. The eastern quadrant, the semicircle I should say, will end up having the largest wind field and the strongest winds as it moves into South Korea. The northwestern side will still have a little bit of punch until that South Korean landfall. Then after that, it weakens. It might survive still, almost to Hokkaido, still as a tropical storm maybe. So we'll watch out for that. This is a look at Lekima's track forecast from the JTWC. They're expecting a weak typhoon, Category 1, to make landfall just over halfway up the island, and then curve towards the north, which potentially gives it more of a future. I think one of the models earlier were calling for it to really move poleward when it did strike China, and possibly even get as far as the Beijing area. Interesting. And then 11W, where they're calling for a somewhat brief typhoon there, and 80 miles an hour. Any reason why they're calling for it to weaken so soon on that forecast at all? Any ideas?
Wait,
Unless the JMA.
I'm still trying to
say
get
that
polar
again.
imagery of Francisco here.
The only thing I could think of is if the JMA is thinking that there's going to be some shear that's going to kick up that wind.
JTWC this.
Oh, JTWC. Okay. Let me
Calling for
make sure I get
weakening
ready to do
on
that.
day 4 and 5, which
Yeah.
isn't really what the models are calling for at the minute, so that's interesting.
No.
But look at the huge, massive size of those wind fields. I've not even checked, actually, if it was to strike one of those
Probably-
islands, what its status would be on the CDPS.
Well, I think they have Lekima weakening so much after the landfall because the interaction with the terrain.
Yes, we're talking about 11W now, though.
Oh, 11W.
11W, because you're going to have a massive storm that's really not in a hurry to go anywhere. And, well,
I'm just trying to look up
strength will be
what
questioned.
they say for the wind field. Actually, well, fairly large. Yeah, no. A diameter northeast to southwest. At one point, they're calling for it to be 510 nautical miles in diameter.
Oh,
So that's interesting as well. With winds of 80 miles an hour. If it was to make landfall on one of those islands at that intensity, I wouldn't want to know what the CDBS scale is.
it would be pretty high up there. That's probably going to end up being probably in the 8s or 9s. It depends on how much rainfall ends up exactly falling overneath the islands, but that would end up being probably an 8 or 9 given the size and the speed of the storm.
I'm trying
Really
to figure
depends
it
on
out
how
live
strong it
here.
is.
That's
Yeah.
actually what I'm doing myself.
You're probably not going to get any. We're not going to get any good answers about that for, I think, probably for another 2 days at
Right,
least.
Devon, if it delivered just 1 inch of rainfall, it would be a stage 4.
Well, it's going to be a lot larger than that.
10 inches, stage 5. 15 inches, stage 6. 20
That's
inches,
about right.
stage 7. Well, that's interesting. Alright, what are we doing next here? Let's see if we've got any questions at this point. Is there an invest in the Bay of Bengal? Yes, very observant. There is an invest there. Invest 95B, which is located in the Bay of Bengal, as you say, in the Indian Ocean. It's the one system that we haven't seen at all on our live streams so far. So let's see about rectifying that if we can. Somewhere over here. Okay.
I'm working on it. I'm trying to get polar. I had a nice polar image of Francisco up, but that's Francisco.
So 95B
Gone now.
is that way, over the Indian Ocean. I suspect, I can't confirm, but I suspect that some of it is remnant energy from WIFA last week. I assume it's where that convection is along the coast of India.
Let me see here.
Love that slider's working right now.
Yes. It definitely is. Oh, you're on it too, are you?
Yes.
That's what we're using for the graphics tonight, believe it or not.
Well, it's a great site when it works, and when
Certainly
it doesn't
is.
work, all I see is a bunch of streaks
It
of
is a mess.
clouds going across.
True enough.
Yeah.
But then again,
So-
most of the invests in the Bay of Bengal messy as all
Still
hell.
want to make
So,
up anyone soon.
taking a look here, the invest is I don't know. The circulation is broader than India. We'll say.
Oh my word.
I couldn't even give you an invest location. It's that broad.
You
Yeah.
were talking about high cloud tops in Lekima earlier, right?
Yeah.
Which are just starting to wane a little bit, but look at the cloud tops in 11W right now. They are huge.
Gonna have to get over there.
Absolutely huge.
Wouldn't be surprised if they were getting up to 90. Let's see here. No, they're not getting as cold as they are in Lekima.
Oh, they are.
A
from
much
what I'm
larger band of minus 80 in there. But I'm not seeing any minus 90s. Meanwhile, Lekima's got that one really large
seeing. I am seeing
top
minus
coming.
90s.
I'm not on, maybe on higher res imagery that you have, but
On Slider.
I'm not getting it on this. If you're on Slider, yeah, I'm using way lower resolution imagery than that. So,
Okay, I won't get into that
Well,
argument because I was going to talk about satellite imagery estimates for storms, and that will go on for ages.
yeah, that's deep inside the rabbit hole.
You know, the thing is, people do jump and have more knee-jerk reactions these days when they're looking at storms, because the resolution is so much better and the frequency of images is so much better, and people are quicker to declare that a storm is stronger than it actually is, when we need to actually wait a while. And if we're going to compare storms of today to storms of the past, and really we have to when we're going to give an intensity estimate, we either change all the old storms in the record based on information that we don't actually have to match the high resolution that we've got, or we use in what I'm doing, the lower resolution imagery for the actual storm estimates, which matches the older imagery, if that makes sense. But there we go.
Makes perfect sense to me.
But those two storms are what we're watching right now, what we need to watch over the next few days. Taiwan on the left-hand side, northwest of Lekima, and it's eyeing up that island. It could miss, it could move north, and you can already tell you thought Lekima was big. 11W, even bigger towards the east near the Mariana Islands. Is there anything in particular that has contributed to the spawning of systems as large as these, or is there no
Well, it's a pretty big ocean.
It certainly is, but these are two anomalously large storms at the same time.
I don't think they're anomalously large. Large storms very typically develop in this region. You think of all of the really massive, large Pacific typhoons. They've all been in and around this region, especially further north than this. Once you get above the latitude of Taiwan, is where you really get the monsters like Typhoon Winnie, Typhoon Tip, also in that area. Two notoriously massive systems. Another massive similarly massive system that you analyzed from back in the 30s or 40s. I can't remember which one. Also in a very similar area just north of these two. So I really don't think that it's that much of an anomaly that these two systems are this big.
Okay.
This is where the storms really like to get large wind fields.
Let's talk to Tim then. Tim, what's going on?
To piggyback off of what you were saying, Devin, this is the primary that they like to form. That, and it's been really quiet in this area. So there's been a lot of thermal energy that's been untapped. And now that we have two good features in this area, and with enough distance between the two of them where they're not interacting with each other, they both have everything they need to really take off.
They certainly do. The energy is definitely there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, these, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, these are the first two systems that I've seen in and around this latitude, and there's nothing that's come through there. So all that water is just prime. You're talking 28, some of those areas, I believe, are 29 degrees Celsius. So, and you have great water temperatures. You probably don't have any shear in that area. So it's got everything it needs to really start blowing up and getting its act together and become a very formidable system. Not just Lekima, but 11W as well.
Certainly make for some photo opportunities from the satellites, I should imagine.
I just pulled up that slider to work to pull up images of both 11W and Lekima, and I'm getting minus 90 on both of them on slider.
Exactly.
You know, on the low res, I was only getting minus 90 on one of them. I'm getting, and minus 90 is for those that aren't in the know, you figure that minus 80 is usually really, really tall cloud tops. So minus 90 is very, very high overshooting tops. And you especially figure that Lekima is getting those minus 90-degree overshooting tops basically towards the center of the central dense overcast that it has. And you also take a look at the microwave that, it's starting to look really, really good on the microwave imagery. So I think Lekima's looking really good for reaching typhoon intensity within the next 24 hours. I'm really liking the look of this storm. Not liking the look for Taiwan, but I am liking the look of the storm.
Indeed. The eye's still pretty clear inside Francisco right now, and it is getting pretty damn close now to leaving Kyushu. Could it be beyond the realms of possibility that it strengthens a little bit in between Japan and Korea?
I've seen weirder things.
I have to agree, Devin. I mean, if it does re-strengthen, it might make it back to minimal typhoon status before it starts getting towards Busan up in South Korea. But we're not going to see anything like it was at its initial landfall.
Looking further south on the visible imagery. Let's take a look, if it isn't too blurred, on what the other two systems look like. If you're familiar with viewing this imagery regularly, you'll see how defined those cloud tops look, and you look at 11W, it's just an absolute enormous blob to the northwest of the Mariana Islands. We zoom out on both of those systems, and there they are again. And also you'll see, first of all, just how large 11W's influence is to the south. And then further west, you look there into the South China Sea, you can also see that Invest 96W. Will it manage to get any energy to develop in its own
That's an
right?
Invest?
Yes, it is.
That looks like that it's get torn apart by about infinite miles an hour of wind shear. I can't, unless I'm looking at the wrong South China Sea. That's
Just
not
west of
looking like an
Luzon?
Invest to me.
West of Luzon.
Is that seriously?
It is serious.
It's not going to be too long, Devin, because Model Guidance hasn't getting absorbed by Lekima in about 3 days out.
That's an atmospheric river. That's not an Invest.
Where are we going here? Looking further east, you can actually see Hawaii, and you can see Flossie just about. Looks very interesting when you look at it on a side-on angle like this from the Himawari 8 satellite. You can almost see just how that convection blowing up near Flossie rises up from the sea surface. And on the left-hand side there, you can see a tiny little swirl, which is what's left of Hurricane Eric. Pathetic. I don't think you can even see the remnants of Gil anywhere, looking down there. No. So that concludes the full look on the full disc of Himawari 8. Certainly,
oh yeah, there is Eric.
A rather busy Western Pacific today.
Wow, that's a lot of nothing. That might be the biggest nothing since 2012.
The biggest nothing since 2012. Explain.
You take a look at the swirl over here that is Eric, and it looks like it's trying to still produce some convection on its northern side. And whatever this trough is to the east of it, I don't know what that's doing. I don't know if that's associated with Eric or whatever this other storm is, or whether if it's just this moisture plume that's feeding up into the western United States and into this giant low. Good Lord. That's massive. But yeah, I mean, you take a look at this, it's just a swirl of nothing.
And here is a video
that is
loop
pathetic.
of Francisco's evolution on rapid scan 2.5 minute imagery from Himawari earlier on today. One more time through this loop, and you can see how the eye was quite clearly defined just before that landfall. Made landfall around dawn, maybe slightly before dawn, and continues banding from the storm, reaching the Korean peninsula, although nothing too significant yet, I should think. And of course the western side is quite clearly the weakest, as we saw on radar imagery earlier. I don't suppose we've got any new radar imagery that we could show right now?
Let me see if it has updated off of the JMA.
It should have done. They do update very often indeed. We'll get that up for you shortly. In the meantime, we're left with that floater imagery of Lekima. If you've got any comments or questions for us whilst we're on the air, please get in touch. We're actually going to take a short break now because it is working. This is Force 13 Live. I've no idea what gets shown during this break, some sort of promotional thing, but there we go. We're going to collect our thoughts for the next 2 or 3 minutes. Stay tuned. We'll have more on this situation shortly.
This is Force 13 with our continuing coverage of Typhoon Alley. I am Timothy Ringo. Along with the rest of the team we have tonight, we have Devin, Max, and Nathan Foy, still here as we are continuing our coverage tonight on our discussion of Typhoon Francisco, Tropical Storm Lekima, and 11W. We do have some new radar imagery courtesy of the JMA, where Francisco is just on the northern edge of the Kyushu Prefecture. I actually have the center over the Ariake Sea, getting ready to actually cross into the cities of Kashima, Yorishino and into Takeo in the next 30-40 minutes. That's what we have going on with Francisco.
There it is. You can see still the largest or the heaviest rainfall is still occurring in coastal regions of the eastern side of the island. I forget the name of the place that's along there.
Some of the towns that are along that
Saiki?
coast: Saiki, Sukimi, Usaki, Orita, Beppu, and up along Beppu Bay.
Now,
Is
I have
where
absolutely zero experience of Japanese, so I hope we don't butcher these place names too badly.
I've got some pretty good pronunciation on Japanese, so I'm pretty confident on those pronunciations.
Aren't we thankful for that? But it looks in those later frames of that radar as we watch again, it is sort of transferring more towards the northern side of the island now.
It is. It's looking like the next few cities that are going to be impacted, and this is going to be going out through the Saga Prefecture. So cities like Kashima, Urashino, Takeo, and Mari, up towards Fukushima Island, Matsuura. Those are going to be the next few cities that it's going to be impacted before it actually does get out into the waterways between Korea and Japan. The last city that may get impacted would be maybe Iki or Tsushima for the Japan side before it actually starts crossing into Korean waters.
Indeed. Alright, let's see what's on Devon's screen right now. What is that?
Well, this is the rather large low pressure that I was just talking about not too long ago. I wanted to get a polar image of. So if we go ahead and take a
there's
look down
Hawaii.
here.
Ah.
Yeah, there's Hawaii. There's Eric. There's Flossie. And then here's this giant moisture plume going into this low. And there's Alaska.
Yep.
And there's some country that I don't know. And there's.
Can we see the typhoons on there or not? Just off. Oh. Oh.
Well,
Wow.
I'd say we can.
Good lord.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd rate those typhoons about taking a look at those cloud tops. They're looking pretty. I don't know.
This is why it's difficult sometimes when
How would you rate them, Nathan?
Well, yeah. But you know, when polar imagery is used, and quite often it inflates the cloud tops, and you can see why when they're near the edge of coverage. If you zoom in on Francisco there, I'm interested to see exactly how that one looks there. It looks so much
That
stronger.
actually came in pretty sharp. I mean, that looks like that looks like almost a Cat 2, Cat 3 in that image.
More than that, I would say.
It's crazy.
But then again, this is polar imagery.
Well, yeah, we're just illustrating the point there that the polar imagery often makes the storms look stronger than the geostationary imagery does.
I just want to. I always like looking at polar imagery every once in a while just to get a nice, refreshing look at stuff. And I'd say, yeah, that's a pretty nice, refreshing look at stuff. And over here to the Atlantic and to see the entirety of the absolute nothing that is going on in the
Wow.
Atlantic. Good lord. Oh, we got something interesting near Ireland, though.
Have we?
There we go. There you go,
All right.
Nathan.
There
That
you
might be
go.
something you might want to discuss.
No thanks. No thank you.
That's all. That's about all I have to say.
Not interesting at all. Tim's now showing us some radar imagery from Taiwan.
Yes, I am, and this is it's a little further out of range. Lekima's obviously well offshore, but you can see some of the banding already from Lekima getting to some of the coastline of Taiwan. Most of this is this is actually a 12-hour loop, so you can actually see just how some of the bandings has progressed and has already dumped some pretty heavy rain in and around some of the areas of, I believe that's Taipei, and some of the mountainous areas. I'm not too familiarized with my Taiwanese geography, so I do apologize to the viewers on that for not having that information on hand. Let me see if I can find some cities that may have just got hit with some of that rain here.
Well, on the eastern side, there's not that many really. Further towards the north, you've got Yilan, which is in
Yilan.
I'm just trying to figure out where that rain hit now.
Yeah, so my you got Yilan County. You have Taroko National Park further to the south of it.
Yeah.
Hualien County
And what
along
we
the
quite
coast
often see on the bottom of our screen, every so often, the warnings go by, and there are some heavy rain warnings for some of these areas, counties. At this point, I'd just like to draw attention to the viewers that the first hour of our coverage is now available to see on our YouTube page, if you want to go back and take a look at that again when we covered the tropics as well. We're staying here for another 20 minutes or so before we go off the air for tonight, considering that we're pretty much covered everything that we ought to cover, and Francisco is one that will continue to rumble on throughout the day. You think it'll strike Korea before the day is out? Probably.
Before the day. Well, define what what you mean by the day.
Well,
If you mean within the next 24 hours,
local
maybe.
time.
Local time. So let's see here.
Towards
There,
11 in the morning there now, so in the next 12 hours.
All
then.
right, so 12 hours. 12 hours. If it's Korea in that time. I think it'll be very close. It'll be very close to see if it'll get there or not, but it could.
Let's see if we can look again at some of the RAM slider imagery. There is a single image. Great. That is Francisco.
Awesome.
This is great. Okay, we'll get it through.
Just a visual bug.
A lot of clicking involved, and hopefully it will go through it now. There we are with the latest on Francisco. What you can see in the latest few frames there, the last half hour or so, is that those minus 60 plus cloud tops are really starting to wane as well here. So it's probably safe to say that Francisco has decreased from typhoon status now, and if we were going to do another hour of coverage, we would be updating those graphics on the left hand side to reflect that. But there it is.
Yeah, it's not necessarily looking like a typhoon anymore, and it's been over land for quite a bit of a while now, so it doesn't look like that's going to end up happening.
Eastern side still quite clearly the strongest, but still some minus 60s just about over the Nagasaki area actually. Any movement on the radar there, Tim? Actually, no, not really at all, is there? Moving back over to your screen. Loading images. Loading for a very long time. Okay, well, we'll come back to that shortly. Very quiet there on the western side. The eastern side still prevailing with the worst of the weather, despite those higher cloud tops on the western side as well. Looks like things starting to blow up on the northwestern side though in those later frames actually. The rain rate really increasing actually. So maybe I spoke too soon.
Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that the storm's increasing in intensity. That just means
No,
that
I
one
wasn't
of the rain.
suggesting as
Sorry.
much. It was just curious to note that there was still a -60 area on the western side, and I was waiting to see whether the radar is starting to reflect that. All right.
Well, the radar is more closely related to the microwave than the infrared.
We've got some questions. We've got one actually. What do you think of this? GFS forecasts a hurricane near North Carolina. What do you think of this and a tropical storm in the Gulf?
How far out is it?
How far out is the main question? 384 hours maybe?
How
Who knows?
how far out is it? How much wind shear is there going to be? And is it heading towards Galveston?
If you've got
Those are the three big questions.
any more questions in the next 15 minutes, it's probably a really good time to send them in. A really good time for us to take them because we've pretty much covered everything else. But yeah, send them in the last 15 minutes of our stream here and we'll answer your questions. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. Mid-August is when they're saying that that will happen, so that's very vague actually. Mid-August.
Mid-August. Yeah, so that'll
Give us some
that's
more
almost like
info.
waiting for it's almost like waiting for the cable company to show up to your house.
Yeah.
Here mid-August sometime.
Mid-August.
Mid-August.
That seems about well within the time frame of what we would put in our fake news hurricane edition room in the Discord server.
Another question, will Lekima be a Fito-like storm? Now,
I have no idea what a Fito-like storm would be.
are we talking about Fito of 2013 by any chance? Wasn't that the most damaging storm of the year, or is that 2007 even? 2013, $10.4 billion in damages.
What?
That did move just north of Taiwan and entered China as a Category 1 typhoon. Moved very close to the Yayama Islands, Miyakijima actually, as a Category 2. That one moved much clearer of Taiwan towards the north. This one will stay further south and will probably be stronger. Curious as to why that one caused so much damage, though.
Probably due to significant rainfall over inland China.
What is interesting to note about that sequence, though, is that there was Typhoon Danas just to the southeast of it. Again, a two typhoon setup that we're talking about, similar to that one, you could say, in that way. Quite funny, though, that part of the naming list has just actually passed us as well. But there we go.
And to answer a remark that was made in the chat earlier about the center of Francisco being over by Kumamoto, I'm actually looking at the JMI radar. I actually have the center closer to the city of Taku as it's still moving on its northwesterly track. Current track, I'm figuring, would take it towards Fukushima Island and out towards Kuroshima and Ao Island before crossing over to Azuchi Oshima Island and then out into the waters between Korea and Japan. So I'm thinking it's a little bit further northwest than what some of the viewers are actually thinking it is.
Yeah. We've got some more questions that we may as well take here. What is our estimate for the 2019 hurricane season? Well, that is a whole hour in itself. For the time being, our official position hasn't changed since we did our start of season analysis. You can find that, I'm pretty sure, if you search Atlantic Hurricane Season Outlook 2019 or something like that on our channel. When would the season start to blow up for the Australian region? Well, that is still a few months off yet. Generally, it starts up at the earliest in October, typically around November. Do we think the Atlantic could pull a 2010, Devon?
I think it's a bit late for it to pull a 2010.
Yep, just a bit.
Didn't they have a ton of storms in July in 2010?
No.
August, though, I think.
June had one storm. July had one or two storms. August had like 3 or 4 storms, and then September was just insane. And then October was one of the most active we've seen. And then
Okay, so that was really September and October all that year. Okay, I'm thinking of one of them had like a record. One of those seasons had like a record active July or something like that.
2005.
No, it was not 2005. It was 2011.
move
That had
on.
a ton of activity in
HWRF is
July.
predicting a weird wind pressure relationship with Lekima. They have it at 110 miles an hour, I assume, 934. Maybe it is not. And 949. I assume HWRF is underdoing the winds. It does happen quite commonly with computer models.
And that sounds like a computer model to me.
Yeah, let's take a look at what the HWRF actually has going on, since we were just talking about it.
Will we see a 2001 repeat in terms of when each storm formed? That is a very vague question. In what basin and why? Strange question. And I did notice another comment from before. It's not the first comment that I've seen commenting about my hair. It's the room. It's not pink. The room clearly makes it look a little bit that way. So just in case you wanted to solve that mystery as well, there you go.
And to answer that wind and pressure relationship with the HWRF, the lowest that I am seeing off of the 18Z HWRF is 936 millibars and 108.5 knots, which would put it well within Category 3 range.
Possible. Interesting.
Oh, that's just very typical with computer models. They tend to make these crazy pressures, and you take a look at the wind estimates, and the computer models are like, yeah, the pressure is going to be 920 millibars. Yeah, pressure is going to be 930 millibars. Pressure is not going to be 920 millibars at that wind speed. All of the computer models, they all forecast the weird. They always forecast the weird wind pressure relationships. That's kind of why you don't focus in on the specific pressure. You want to more focus in on the wind speeds themselves. And that's why when you... Go ahead.
Continue.
And that's why whenever you look at intensity guidance, you don't see anything about the pressures on them. It's only wind speed, because the wind speed is a lot more accurate than the calculation of the central pressure of the storms.
We just had another interesting question regarding whether they can be on our live stream if they're in a storm area right now, and our doors are certainly open for any correspondence, because it is a community-led project. Always has been, maybe always will be, who knows, I can't always tell the future, but community is very important with what we do, because without it our coverage would be pretty hellish. So contact us through the usual mediums, contact@force13.com, or any of the outlets. You can message us on the Discord server as well. If you'd like to get involved either with our live events or producing content or anything, because we certainly want to hear more from people who are on the ground. And at the moment in Asia, we used to be in touch with quite a few people, but not so much recently, so we'd like to change that again. We're just about ready to wrap up here, so let's see if there's any more questions that are coming in just now. How likely do you think it is for the Atlantic to have an active season now despite inactivity? Sounds a rather paradoxical question, but there you go.
I don't rule anything out. We have seen some very quiet time periods, and we're getting to be less than 35 days from the peak of what would climatologically be the peak of the season. So there's still plenty of time for us to see this become a very active season. Just depends on how everything sets up.
People just want an active Atlantic hurricane season. No, but in all honesty, we're taking a look at it, and at least if you want to go off of the 1995 average of the 15 storms per season, we're probably going to be below that this season. If you want to say, oh, we've had 10 storms a year back to 1850, which maybe, we'll have more info on that in the future if the average is actually 10 or not. But if you go back to 1969, I think it's 12, but that has to do with the 1970s being deader than a doornail. But you go back to 1969 and it's 12, and we're probably going to be more in line with that average.
Well, you know that Force 13 earlier this year did a reanalysis of the 1851 or 53, I can't remember, to 1898, and found a lot of new storms. I'm not sure my information is up to date here, that I could bring you that average total. I'm not sure that I can. So that's a bummer. But at some point, we will be able to tell you what the average is and whether it's gone up very much or not. I would imagine that it hasn't.
And it'll require a lot of going into research and seeing what it is, because obviously we all know that the 1870s and 1880s were a pretty active time in the Atlantic, as well as the 1890s. And then you go forward, it starts getting a little inactive in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, another very active stretch, and it went into the early 50s. Then it kind of died down again, went back up in the late 60s, dead through the 70s and most of the 80s, and then back up after 1988, and it really hasn't gone back down since.
One or two exceptions in recent years, but particularly the last 2 or 3, it's been very busy in the Atlantic. And even last year, that shouldn't have been busy, really. You take away all those subtropical storms and there's hardly anything there apart from the 2 big ones. All right.
That's... Go ahead. I had an irrelevant point to make.
Yeah.
Just go.
I don't think we have time for that, sadly. Yeah, I think someone was just carrying on the 2001 question that I was struggling with. For example, at the beginning of the 2001 Atlantic was very inactive, but at the end, activity really began to ramp up. Any correlation?
I'd say it's probably too early to tell. Once we actually look at how this season plays out, we could probably revisit that.
We haven't really been, we haven't really took stock yet and had a look at the information now that we are in early August. What scenarios now actually can't transpire because we've already passed July and the first part of August now, and what could we still have on the way? 1995 was a good analogue to begin with, but we're probably going to be ruling that out now because it must have had a few storms by now.
Let me take a look now that I think about it.
Well, we're finishing the show now, Tim, so enjoy that.
Well, I will have that information in our Discord server. Again, the link in our description, and I'll have that information there.
Well, that pretty much concludes everything tonight. If you missed the news, the latest is that Typhoon Francisco is probably not a typhoon anymore, just about to leave the island of Kyushu, Japan. We'll head towards South Korea later today, local time. Lekima is intensifying and will probably become a typhoon fairly soon and could strike Taiwan as a severe typhoon in the next few days. 11W is going to be absolutely massive and will affect probably the Ogasawara Islands of Japan and could have a huge wind field and rain field when it does so. 96W is located in the South China Sea, 95B in the Indian Ocean in the Bay of Bengal, and Flossie is still alive near Hawaii. That's it from us tonight. Thanks ever so much everyone for taking part. David, Max, Devon and myself and the other people that we had in the last hour. Good night from us here at Force 13 HQ Studio 4.